Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. I know it's been a little bit since I last posted, but I really wanted to take some time and come up with a video for you all about symptoms and what I've been through and what I've felt and dealt with, so you really didn't feel alone. You could be reassured that everything that you are feeling is not individualized to you, and you don't have it any worse off than others. Some people have it better, some people have it worse, but in the grand scheme of things, everybody deals with the same kind of things. Their symptoms just feel like the worst to them. It could be your head, it could be your heart, it could be any area of your body, but everybody's going through it together. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the illnesses that I thought that I had based on the symptoms, and then I'm going to break down by body part the symptoms that I actually did have and that I did experience. And so hopefully it reassures you all that you can get through it and that you're not alone. So, before I get into it, please, subscribe to the channel. If you get anything from the video, please comment, please like, please share it with your friends, get this out there. There's a lot of people who are, going about their days smiling, but behind closed doors, they're really struggling with this because it is definitely a battle. So to jump into it, I'm going to start with the illnesses, and I have a long list of things. So I might, my eyes are going to look away for some moments just to get my bearings back on track. But the major thing for me was centered around the heart. Cardiophobia was the biggest issue that I had. So fear of heart attacks, heart failure, heart disease. That was the major focus for me. I'll get into the chest symptoms a little bit later on, but the heart issues, having heart disease, was the biggest thing for me. I also had fears of brain tumors because of some head symptoms and some eye symptoms, and also cancer was another one that popped up. To touch on that, when I went back to get reassurance for a calcium score test, which was 0, was a negative calcium score test, the best you could get. There's no blockages, no anything like that. They also said, oh, well, but you happen to have 2 nodules on your lungs. It did turn out to be benign, just something to, I guess, monitor just to make sure that there's nothing going on, but by all accounts, benign. But again, you go for one thing, you get reassurance on something, and then another thing pops up, and then you have to go down that rabbit hole when you're already feeling incredibly anxious. So on top of those 3, there was the liver disease, which was another short-lived period of time where my blood work was off, and there was, I guess, very high liver enzymes or something along the lines of liver disease. So I had to wait a couple of weeks and then get retested, and they actually normalized. My blood work was all fine when those tests came back. So I had to breathe a sigh of relief for that one and not really worry about that. So those were the illnesses that were the biggest issues for me. So to jump into the actual body parts and symptoms, we'll start with the head and talk about headaches. It's a very common symptom for anxiety and health anxiety. I had them for long periods of time. This was going back closer to about 8 years ago, when everything first kind of started for me. So I would have them for like a week straight. There would be no let up. It turned out, yes, to be just tension headaches. It did send me to a neurologist. I got everything kind of checked out. Everything came back okay. It just described as a tight band wrapped around the head that just lasted and went on and on. There was like no relief from it. There's head pains. Usually sharp pains randomly happen in the head. Usually, from what I felt, it was more on the left side. I don't know if where you feel it makes any kind of a difference, but I would feel more so sharp pains. There were some times of dull pains, dull achy kind of thing that was here and then it was gone. So I didn't think that was long lasting in terms of just the stabbing kind of pains. Brain zaps or brain surges. Now, people define these things differently. For me, it was more so the feeling of a surge that just kind of started in the center of the head or brain and then just kind of went out from there. Very, very scary, but it's kind of there and gone like that within a second. But it just gives you the feeling that everything is about to kind of fade to black. For me anyway, that's what the thought was. Total lack of focus and concentration. I could not watch a movie at all. I couldn't even watch half-hour episodes of a TV show at all. Reading a book was out of the question because I could try to dedicate 30% of my attention and focus on something or someone, but 70% of my focus and my mind was scanning my body constantly for symptoms, mostly around the chest and the heart, which I'll get to in a minute. I put nightmares down for the head because I just didn't know where else to put it. I want to put it in general category. But some of the best directors in the world for movies couldn't come up with some of the nightmares that I was having. The vivid imagery and like torturous kind of nature of some of these things was just very, very bizarre. And all of it happened kind of at the height of my anxiety. When I actually stayed away from horror, like I was always a horror movie fan, but when I was going through all of this, I stayed away from that because I didn't want to get to a high level of anxiety or fear from watching anything and have that kind of linger around. So I stayed away from it, but I still had these horrible nightmares. And since anxiety levels, came down and overall anxiousness came down and overall stress came down, and I'm managing a lot better. Ever since that started to happen, the nightmares kind of went away. So oddly enough, that's also just attributed to anxiety and thrown into that umbrella. So to move on to the eyes, eye floaters, obviously just harmless debris on the eyes. You notice more when you're anxious because you just pick up more things when you're anxious. They've most likely been around for a while. They were with me. I did notice them before, but I never really cared about them. But when you're highly anxious, the smallest things also set you off, which you'll see because there's going to be some kind of comedy that also comes up for this. Tunnel vision was another one. Obviously, when you get put into fight or flight, your peripherals, your peripheral vision shrinks, goes away, and you can just see what's in front of you, getting ready for the immediate threat and to fight or flight. There's also black shadows kind of that were on the top of my vision that I could notice if I was looking straight ahead. On the top of my vision, there would be kind of like a shadowy, I don't want to say substance, but just some kind of looking like a black shadow was on the top of my vision. That was there, and then that was gone. Also, light flashes I got a lot of when I was sitting there. I could just be watching TV, and there would be usually always a gray silver flash of light, kind of more so in the center of my vision. That really was the scariest eye symptom that I had. I did see an optometrist to get my eyes checked after not going for like 8-10 years. And again, everything was fine. So it's just, again, chalked up to anxiety. Visual snow was another one. Look, it does actually look like snow falling in your eyesight. Usually happens when I was doing something exerting, even though I didn't do much of it because I was afraid of it, which probably actually led to why it does happen, because with me, I was just very lethargic. I didn't want to do anything that was physically exerting, and I'll get into that and touch more on that later. Actually, there was one moment when I went into panic mode when I was looking at my phone, looked up from my phone, and thought that there was some kind of visual distortion, but it turns out it was actually just my freaking eyebrows, and I saw the bottom of my eyebrows, and it actually just sent me into panic mode. So sometimes you just gotta look back and laugh at yourself when you go through all this kind of stuff, because there are some moments where you think something is wrong, and it's just literally nothing. To move to the ears, constant ringing, gets incredibly loud and louder when you go into fight or flight, when you go into anxiety and panic. It's kind of always there, just something that you notice, and when you notice it, you tend to pay more attention to it, whether you want to call it tinnitus or tinnitus, how you want to pronounce it also. I think that it's always there, but if you're just doing other things, talking to people, busy with other stuff, you just don't pay any attention to it. There's no focus on it, and you don't even pick it up. That was the only ear symptom I had. To jump to the chest now, which was my main problem area. Chest pains, everything that you could think of, sharp pains, dull pains, radiating to my back, stabbing pains in my chest, bruising feelings, just natural, general achy feelings in my chest. Some were short term, some were long-term, but overall the pains were 24/7 constant for a month. From the first time I went into the cardiologist office to the time I went back in there for the follow-up, I had constant chest pain. It never let up, it never ended, until I got the first bit of reassurance that your heart was fine. There was nothing wrong with the heart, you just have extra beats. And then the chest pains kind of all went away, but the ectopic heartbeats or the skips or flutters or PVCs, PACs, whatever you want to call them, they stayed. That was my biggest and worst and most feared individual symptom, which actually led to the fear of having the fear, which just left me in constant fight or flight, constant high edginess, high anxiety, waiting for the next thing to come about, the next skip, the next flutter, constant adrenaline dumps. It was miserable. At the highest point of my anxiety, I was having hundreds of them a day. When it was quantified, it made it even worse for me because I felt like I was just feeling everything all the time. And it was rough. Racing heart, obviously, is very common. Thumping heartbeat. Even when doing the little things, picking up a wire, bending down, picking up a wire, I felt my heart like thudding. Now I could go outside and I could jog, and I barely feel my heart thudding. But I was feeling it when I was literally doing nothing before. So feeling the skip beats triggered me beyond belief. Feeling my heartbeat triggered me. Then it got to a point where I was so fearful of that when I didn't feel my heartbeat and when I didn't feel heart skips, it also triggered me because I felt like something was really wrong then too. Both meant something was catastrophically wrong with me, so there was just no peace whatsoever throughout the day. And again, to touch on the constant body scanning for any kind of heart issues, any kind of gas issues in and around my left side, I always attributed to the heart and set me in the panic mode. When I didn't feel things, it just made me feel like my pulse was weakening and I was developing heart failure over a span of a month, which is not really the way that it works, unless there's some kind of major underlying issue. But I do have other videos on the skip beats and the ectopic heartbeats, the PVCs and PACs. If you do experience those and it is a big fear for you, please check out my other videos and also check out the videos from Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who's a cardiologist from England. I also had consultations with him and spoke to him about this. That's another one of the videos that I have, but he's very informative, very reassuring on that subject. So to jump to blood pressure. I know a lot of people have white coat syndrome. I was beyond that. I was white coat hypertension. The first time I went into the cardiologist, my heart rate was fine. My blood pressure was 120/80. It was perfectly fine, perfectly normal. And then everything just kind of progressed and progressed and went higher and higher to the point where I was just fearing going in there, fearing the cuff, fearing all that. And it kind of ended up with climaxed in me going in there and having a panic attack in the cardiologist's office. My heart rate was in the 150s. My blood pressure was 145/110. Like, oh, we have to do an EKG because it's just too high. I was sweating in there. It was a terrible experience. But then the cardiologist didn't really even seem to care because at that point, every test was done. There was no problems with my heart, nothing structurally wrong with my heart, no arterial problems, no blockages. Stress tests and everything was fine. It all comes down to anxiety, panic, and fear. So to move to the stomach, there's days where I would have just no appetite. I couldn't eat anything. I was trying to diet and lose weight when I found out about this stuff because I wanted to get more healthy. I was 245, 250 pounds when all this kind of stuff happened. So I was not in the best shape. I was not taking the best care of myself. Now I'm down to 205 and I eat healthy. And there's a lot of things that diet, sleep, and exercise play huge roles in your overall mental and physical health. So I would tell you guys to just really look at those three areas and see what or where you can find some improvement in those areas, because that will go a long way to help it. To go along with that, there was, Ibs style symptoms, which also led to diarrhea. Sad to say, sorry, but that happens also with high degrees of stress and anxiety. To jump to the arms and hands, numbness and tingling, usually always on the left side. At least that's where I always paid attention to it and noticed it. It did happen on in my right side also. I could always feel it in my right fingers. Cold hands, cold feet, sweaty hands, sweaty feet. But the numbness and the tingling was obviously more so scary because that's just attributed with more major kind of issues. Twitching is another odd one, which is also a funny story. But I had twitches all over, not just in my chest. Of course, I had them in the left side of my chest because I was always kind of over compensating that side. I felt like laying on that side or leaning on that side kind of lessened symptoms for me. But I would have painful twitches in my ankles. I had it for one night that I can remember. Then it went away and didn't come back. But actually painful twitches in my ankles. And I actually one time was laying down and felt twitches in my left butt cheek, which actually made me jump and put me into panic mode because I thought something was wrong. And again, that's just another one of those funny things that when you're highly sensitized, anything could just kind of set you off. There's two more sections I have left, but they're still very important. And the first one is fears. Now, I had a paralyzing fear, and there were paralyzing rushes of fear and impending doom that just felt like the walls and the world was closing in and immediate death was looming and I was going to fade to black. That's another one of the scariest things that I've experienced, along with just the heart symptoms and sensations. And I did kind of later start to ask myself a little bit of questions, like why I would think that, feel that. And I think a lot of times I would be laying on my left side. And after a certain period, you know, you're using your left pectoral muscle, you're using your muscles in your arms to kind of hold yourself up sometimes. So after a little bit of times, like they would kind of go numb a little bit or start to go numb. And like, I think subconsciously it just kind of triggered me to think that that was somehow numbing my heart or something like that was happening. But I was afraid to close or lock the doors in the bathroom. I was even afraid to go to the bathroom with the lights. I was used to leave the lights off for whatever reason. I don't know, it gave me some form of peace and it was just more calming for me. I was scared to do anything that was physically exerting. I was afraid to jog. I would walk. I mean, I would go outside and go for walks and things like that, but if I had to do anything that would jump my heart rate up, I would just try to avoid that. Now, not so much. Like, you know, now I actually do jog, and now I actually do try to hit personal bests and do go a little bit further every day, every time I can get out there. You know, you can feel your heart thumping sometimes. Sometimes I actually don't even feel my heart thumping anymore, which still, you know, still puts me in like gives me a thought of, you know, why isn't my heart thumping? But I kind of just try to take a whatever attitude with that and say, I'm working on myself. I'm building a lot of things about myself. I'm building my endurance. I'm strengthening my heart. I'm eating more healthy foods, heart healthy foods. So these could just be the benefits of those improvements in those areas. I also had a fear of sleep because I had a fear of dying in my sleep and not waking up, which could have also led to the nightmares. Also the fear of stretching, even waking up in the morning and stretching gets the blood flowing, gets the blood pumping, so that would get your heart rate up, even for a brief period of time, but that would scare me because anything that would up my heart rate would make me panic and give me higher levels of anxiety. And the fear of just sudden death with heart issues and the cardiophobia just impacted me in every area. Afraid of the exercise, afraid of drives, afraid of just everything, any and everything, which would obviously give me high degrees of anxiety and edginess all throughout my day, which has increased adrenaline dumps and increased heart rate and increased all of that stuff just in general, but just did not give me much time for peace. So the last category I have is just general, which is more so I'll talk about like intrusive thoughts, which was another miserable thing, especially in the beginning, because it was all day, every day, and it was just loud screaming thoughts in my mind that everything was coming to an end. I was going to go out via heart attack. even with the anxiety, that the anxiety was never going to end. It will never end. You'll never get past it. You'll never beat it, which would lead to mental fatigue and physical fatigue that would last for days sometimes. Very just lethargic. Words could trigger me. Commercials could trigger me. And the biggest issues for me that I could remember is the one night I woke up and I was already in the middle of a panic attack. Most of my panic attacks were actually nocturnal. I had a more so nocturnal than when I was awake, as odd as it sounds. But I woke up and I was already fearing PVCs and skipped heartbeats so much that it was literally happening like every couple seconds. And that led me to the emergency room, to where they just said it was panic and anxiety, and the heart is obviously still good. So I remember just breaking down. My parents knew I went to the emergency room. My mother came to the emergency room. I remember just crying, thinking that everything was kind of falling apart. And more so the biggest fear was around leaving my son behind, because we have a great relationship. And in other areas, he does not have such a great relationship. So anything that would lead to him being upset would obviously just kind of, crush me and leave me in an even worse mental state. That pretty much wraps up all the symptoms. And there's things that I didn't touch on and left out and forgot about, probably like general aches. I had general aches all over my body too, mostly my hips and legs. But there's general aches and things also that came about that just didn't really make it in the main list. But I just really wanted to show you guys that you're not alone in your fight, and everybody's going through the struggle, and you can get through it and you can beat it. So thank you so much for watching it. If you did make it to the end, please comment down below that I will beat anxiety. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I try to answer any questions that get asked to me. Again, please like the video, please subscribe to the channel, and please, again, share this with anybody who may be struggling also. So thank you guys very much. I love you, and I'll see you in the next video.